Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, September 6th, 2023, and today we are going to be talking about the Michigan Republican Party, a major statewide GOP that is in a complete state of disarray following the 2020 and 2022 elections. Now, the Michigan GOP has been in quite a bad place for a while. We remember that in the 2022 governor's race, their top 5 candidates could not even field enough signatures legitimately and thus were disqualified by the State Board of Elections. Following that, the Michigan GOP re-elected their very right-wing conservative chair who refuses to give up the 2020 presidential election. For a while now, and even recently, the Michigan GOP has continued to assert the wrong lie that the GOP had the election stolen from them, that Donald Trump had the election stolen from him by President Joe Biden. This is the argument that has been made and ran on and lost by many members of the mainstream GOP in the 2022 midterms. The overwhelming majority of the nation believes that the 2020 election was fair. And yet somehow, a state that, again, Joe Biden won in the 2020 presidential election has continued to push down this line, push down this pathway of saying the election was stolen. This is an article from September 1st, 2023. September 1st, 2023. Saying that the Michigan GOP chair puts focus on investigation into alleged 2020 voter registration fraud. Point being, the quote is right. Everything has fallen off a cliff. This is a state that the Republican Party desperately needs in the 2024 presidential election. If they want a pathway to the presidency, it lies through Michigan. And seeing how this state voted for Joe Biden by a narrow amount, just 2.8% in the last presidential election, it is reasonable to believe that this state should be competitive yet again in 2024. But the collapse was nearly immediate following the election lies that Donald Trump proposed, that Donald Trump utilized. Here we have Kristina Karamo. This is the Michigan GOP chair who has been voted in multiple times by the state Republican Party. Somebody who has led this state into a complete state of disarray, moved the party to the right, moved the party closer to the one candidate who could not win it again in 2024, President Donald Trump. It doesn't just start with the election lies. It has been brewing time and time again as the conspiracy theories have taken full force into the Michigan GOP's chair, who has really only herself to benefit with some of the things that she's been doing. I mean, seeing how she has really strategized across the state to make the extremist part of the party the most prevalent in the GOP primary process, in the GOP state leadership, whatever it might be. I mean, she has done everything to benefit herself and nothing to benefit the statewide Republican Party. The Michigan Republican Party is also broke. That isn't an understatement. You are talking bankrupt type of broke. This is one of the most previously powerful Republican parties across the country that won in 2016, came in and took a 28-year voting streak for Democrats and broke it in half, voted for the GOP. And yet, ultimately, that was the start of their demise. Ironically enough, it took that time frame, 2016 to now, to completely throw everything to ruin. Being broke is one thing, but being extremist and continuing down a pathway, a losing pathway, is another thing. And don't even get me started on the most recent Michigan GOP meeting that resulted in a spinal injury, that resulted in a fist fight. I kid you not, there was a Michigan GOP meeting, the most recent one, July of 2023, that resulted in a physical fight between the members. If anything could capture the state of the Michigan GOP, this is the perfect representation. That is a problem for the statewide Republican Party that, again, desperately needs to win again. I mean, nobody really talks about the state of statewide GOPs until you get to this point. There's a reason why you never hear people talking about the Maryland Democratic Party. There's a reason why you never hear people talking about the Arizona Democratic Party. It only comes up, enough so that we know that they exist, but they are never scrutinized to this extent because they are never this bad. Even the Democratic Party of Wyoming is probably in a better state than the Republican Party of Michigan. And that isn't an understatement. That shows you just how far this GOP has fallen. And the reason also why it's significant is because it is a battleground state. I wouldn't be here, talking to you about the, North Dakota GOP if they were bankrupt. No matter what, it has a partisan lean of Republican plus 30. They could spend $0 on the next 10 elections and still win them by landslides because that's the state of the race. But when you have the Michigan Democratic Party with a bench of tens and tens of candidates, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in their bank account, coming off an 11-point victory in a supposed, and you can't see me, but I'm putting air quotes up, a red wave year. I mean, you can see that the Michigan Democrats are very clearly on top, very clearly doing very well, and the Michigan GOP is stuck in the past. They're stuck in the past with these election laws. The mood is grim among statewide GOP officials. Quoting here from a Michigan Republican operative, granted anonymity because he wasn't authorized by the state party to comment, obviously, and also probably wouldn't want to say this on the record anyway, but saying the Michigan GOP is in just as bad of a place as a political party can be. They're broke. Their chair can't even admit she lost a race. It's defunct. This is how the GOP officials view their own party. It isn't to say that everybody agrees with this. Very clearly, the voters in the state of Michigan, the Republicans wanted, Christina Caramo to be the GOP chair. So in one instance, we see that it is clear that they have a directive. They have a narrative that they want to go down, and it's the pro-Trump narrative. On the other end, there are many people who are dissidents. There are people here who see what's wrong with the statewide GOP, and they see that it's a problem, but obviously not enough to actually stop their chair from going down this very, very extremist platform. The Michigan GOP needs to move to the center. They don't need to be moving to the right, and it's a problem that I think everybody but them can see. And it also isn't just that. We've talked about the fist fight. We've talked about how they are broke. We've talked about how so many things are working against them, but they also have this slate of electors that they put forth in the 2020 presidential to override the free and fair election that was held in the state of Michigan that is now coming back to bite. These GOP electors are now arrested in so many terms, on state charges for trying to overturn the presidential election. These people might end up in jail for the things that they were convinced to do by the Michigan GOP, that they were convinced to do by President Donald Trump, in essence. Now, I'm not here to try to go after the Michigan GOP. I am here to cover the very fair criticism of the statewide Republican Party that tells us and shows us just how bad of a state they are in. It is a multitude of things. And even when it comes down to important Senate races like the one coming up in 2024, where they have a prime opportunity, given that it's going to be an open seat, they have to knock a former congressman and say, hey, can you go ahead and enter into the race? Can you come into this position because we have no other bench? There isn't another prominent statewide official. There isn't another well-known Republican in this state. They are calling on someone who left Congress in 2015 who may even end up serving a singular or two terms at most. I mean, what you are finding is that the Michigan GOP is in this consistent state of disarray. You also need to look no further than their statewide GOP Twitter, something that is indicative of the state of the party, considering that looking at their digital strategy, it seems to exist 3 years ago when Donald Trump was arguing that the election was stolen from him. We can see here that they talk about these random one-off memes. They talk about random things that people simply do not care about. They're tweeting out things that are pro-life, knowing they just lost the abortion referendum by such a significant amount. They're going against certain things that aren't mainstream policies. They're getting ratioed. They're getting attacked. And I'm not here to say, I mean, look at this tweet, be ungovernable. Look at this, retweeting supposed proof that the election was stolen. I mean, the COVID games, who is doing this, right? More proof. Will anyone listen? Well, the voters very clearly don't care, right? They're very clearly in this position where they see how extreme this is. They see how these election lies are ones that shouldn't be populated by a mainstream party, and they rejected Michigan Republicans up across the ballot. You have to ask yourself, why, for the first time in 40 years, in a supposed red wave year, did Democrats get a trifecta? How in the world does that even happen? because of an incompetent statewide GOP. So I imagine that where we are right now, where the Biden campaign is today, they see those national polls. They're aware that they're neck and neck with President Trump. But when it comes down to Michigan, when it comes down to who has the actual ground game, who has the actual support from their statewide party, who won't be in these array of circumstances, these arrays of, issues and scandals, the Democrats will come out on top. President Biden will also come out on top. A lot of you guys have been wondering, why am I so confident that President Biden will be reelected in 2024? And I tell you, it's because of stories like this one. Because it isn't just Michigan, where the statewide GOP is in disarray. You see it happening now in Arizona with Kari Lake and Blake Masters, the two frontrunners, failed candidates from 2022, running again in 2024. You see it happening up and across the country where these extremist policies have taken foot. In Wisconsin, where the state legislature, controlled by Republicans, wants to impeach a Supreme Court justice that was just elected by 10 points as the supposed Democrat on the ballot there. I mean, that is not a winning strategy. That is not how you win back voters that turned away from you after just one administration. Voters that were with the Democrats for 2-3 decades, that turned away from them in a huge, major victory for the GOP. They lost just 4 years later. Then they lost again in 2022. It is a story that we will reflect on in 10 years from now and say, how did they screw it up so bad? And Michigan is a prime example of that. I'm in a position where I see Michigan as a state that Democrats are in a much better position in 2024 even than they were in 2020. Even though the polls may say it's neck and neck, I believe that there could be a competitive election today. But Biden is polling at or around where he was back in 2020. President Trump is the only one we've seen an increase in, and guess what? Those voters eventually came. The polls in 2020 weren't super accurate, but they underestimated Democrats in 2022. So who knows what direction they'll swing in this time around. Donald Trump's support at 48% in Michigan wasn't enough to win, but it was enough to win in 2016. He didn't win a majority of voters in the state of Michigan. The percentage here is increasing for Democrats. Donald Trump has been staying, again, at and around the same, and Joe Biden has as well, which means should there be an inevitable shift, should there be, forcing those 10% of respondents to choose a candidate, they may choose Joe Biden, as many did in the 2020 presidential. And it doesn't help. Nothing helps when the statewide GOP is in such a state of disarray. I keep coming back to this because it's important. Because there is an extremely, supposedly, important Senate race in Michigan. I mean, right, we have Elisa Slotkin or Hill Harper, whoever the Democrat is, who might be able to hold the seat, probably will hold the seat given where we are right now, but could lose it. Democrats could reasonably lose a Senate race in 2024, depending on how the presidential election goes. But it would require all hands on deck. It couldn't just be one, candidate, former Congressman Mike Rogers, being that main candidate who's winning over the voters. Yes, he's the face of it, but the money needs to come from somewhere. The strategy needs to come from somewhere. The campaign staff and support needs to come from somewhere. People don't work for free. People aren't going to stay with the GOP if they could go to the Heritage Foundation in D.C. and actually get paid a wage. That is the problem with the Michigan Republican Party. They are broke. They have no support. They're ran by extremists, and they are doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on these losing policies. The pro-life stance statewide, the election was rigged stance, statewide. A number of issues that lost them the state Senate, lost them the state House, lost them the governorship, and will lose them the 2024 presidential election. And they continue to vilify the left for supposedly rigging the election. I look at this and you can only laugh. You can only reflect on it and say, you know what? I wish I was running this party in some circumstance, right? Because I would do a hell of a lot better of a job than someone who's probably getting paid six figures to do this as well. Now, I don't have the article for you because the Detroit Free Press actually isn't free. There's a paywall there, so I don't have it for you on screen, but I encourage you to read into it. But we find that in the new state budget here, there actually is a bit of a hefty chunk of change reserved for, Christina Caroma, who is in a position where, again, she is the statewide GOP chair, but her party or her family is going to benefit from this grant in this state budget here. You're talking, I believe, $75 million at stake here that could very well be going straight and funneled into someone who's in this position. So it's interesting. It's certainly something that I would recommend looking into. I'm at a position where I think there's a lot of shady politics around this GOP party chair. I think there's a lot of shady politics around the type of strategizing and campaigning that she is doing, because in some ways it almost seems like she's intentionally trying to lose the elections for the Republican Party in Michigan. I don't think that's actually her intention, but it's the response, it's the byproduct of her leadership. And it's something that is unbecoming of someone who is a GOP chair in a battleground state, one of the closest states in the last presidential election. You can hear the disappointment through my voice. I think that, as much as I do try to keep a nonpartisan view on politics, obviously there is going to be an inherent lean, there's going to be inherent partisanship because this is a human endeavor. But at the same time, I try to remove that. But in this circumstance, I can only look at it and say, how does it get this bad for a party that was so exceptionally strong in 2016 to fall so far? As accurately reported by Politico, a nosedive, one that I don't know is recoverable in time for 2024. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.